It took years to reach this point, but Rachel Zegler and Disney's live-action Snow White remake have officially shattered records, just not the kind they were hoping for, with multiple back-to-back trailers hitting 1 million dislikes. Despite YouTube hiding the dislike count from the public, this film has quickly become a PR disaster for Disney. Welcome back, everyone! Today, we're diving into how Disney's latest Snow White remake is shaping up to be a massive box office blunder. The backlash is so severe that all press involving Rachel Zegler is now being tightly controlled to minimize damage. According to reports, Disney knows their lead actress has become insufferable to audiences, and they're taking extreme measures to prevent her from making things worse during the press run, instead of hosting a grand Leicester Square premiere, standard. For a film with a $212 million budget, Disney is scaling back significantly. This isn't just about logistics. It's an attempt to avoid further controversy surrounding the movie. With millions of dislikes, controlled press appearances, and a growing disconnect between Disney and its audience, Snow White is shaping up to be one of the company's biggest mistakes yet. What do you think? Disney is taking extreme precautions with its Snow White live-action remake, opting for tightly controlled press events instead of a grand British premiere. The decision aims to minimize anti-woke backlash and avoid the controversy surrounding lead actress Rachel Zegler. According to an insider, Disney is already anticipating the negative reaction and has significantly reduced media interactions. The studio has taken the highly unusual step of canceling a London premiere and ensuring that Zegler only engages with pre-approved journalists and influencers who won't pose difficult questions. Many wondered how much trust Disney would place in Zegler's ability to handle press responsibilities. Turns out, not much. The company's House of Mouse strategy now involves carefully selecting interviewers and scrutinizing questions more heavily than a political press briefing. But will this strategy save Disney from disaster, or is it just delaying the inevitable? What do you think? Will Zegler stay on script, or will another viral moment put Snow White further into controversy? Let me know in the comments. Disney's approach to the Snow White press tour is becoming increasingly clear. Limit Rachel Zegler's media exposure to avoid controversy. The studio seems more concerned about international optics than domestic reactions, carefully managing her public appearances to prevent further backlash. A prime example? The recent Tokyo premiere, where Zegler was presented as a Hollywood starlet without facing unfiltered questions. With translators controlling both directions of communication, Disney ensured that only safe narratives reached audiences. But why silence the film's lead actress? Reports suggest that Disney is worried about her past statements resurfacing, potentially harming the already struggling film. According to That Park Place, box office projections for Snow White continue to decline, with initial estimates dropping from $70 million domestically. Could this damage control strategy save the film, or is it just delaying the inevitable Disney's? Snow White remake is in trouble, and the latest box office projections confirm it. Initial estimates placed its domestic opening between $63–70 million, but updated forecasts have now dropped to $48–53 million. With a worst-case scenario of just $45 million for a film with a rumored £300 million production budget, that's a disaster. With marketing costs factored in, Snow White would need to gross at least $600–700 million globally just to break even. An increasingly unlikely outcome. Disney's strategy? Limit Rachel Zegler's media exposure to avoid further controversy. If she makes another divisive statement, as she has in the past, the box office could plummet even further. This explains why her recent Tokyo premiere appearance was carefully managed, ensuring only filtered questions reached her through translators. Will Disney's damage control work, or is this film already doomed? Disney's strategy for Snow White is clear. Keep Rachel Zegler away from controversy at all costs, even if it means limiting press interactions and carefully controlling interviews. At the recent Tokyo premiere, the approach was evident. With all questions going through translators, Disney ensured Zegler wasn't asked anything that could spark backlash. Instead of addressing concerns about the film's reception, she likely faced softball questions carefully crafted to keep things positive. Meanwhile, Snow White's box office projections continue to fall, now expected to open between $48–53 million domestically, with a worst-case scenario of $45 million. Considering its $300 million plus budget, That's disastrous. The film needs at least $600–700 million globally just to break even, a near impossible feat given the growing backlash. With no other major releases that week, Snow White is likely to open on at least 4,000 screens, meaning its per-theater average will be critical in determining just how much audiences actually care. Can Disney's damage control save Snow White? Sainpans, set satire and siniwants. Or is it doomed to be another massive flop with Snow White tracking at an abysmally low $48–53 million opening? The big question is, can it drop even further? Or have we already hit the lowest point? Some argue this is the absolute floor, that no matter how much backlash Rachel Zegler and Disney face, there will always be families who just want to take their kids to a movie. And if Snow White is the only major release that weekend, they'll go regardless. But what if that's not true? What if the controversy has actually reached dinner table conversations? Imagine parents discussing weekend plans. Hey, want to take the kids to a movie? Sure, as long as it's not that awful Snow White remake. If that's happening in enough households, then we're looking at a true disaster. Disney's strategy of hiding Zegler from the press and tightly controlling interviews suggests they're genuinely afraid she could say something that drives even more people away. And if that happens, we could see an even lower opening, potentially dropping to 45 million or worse. What do you think? Is the damage already done? Or could Snow White still plummet further? Right now, Snow White is tracking between $48–54 million for its opening weekend, but could it go even lower? Some argue this is rock bottom, that even with the backlash, families looking for a weekend movie will still show up. But others aren't convinced. In fact, every time projections are adjusted downward, the film still underperforms. That suggests we haven't hit the floor just yet. One key factor? Pre-sales. Disney stopped reporting ticket pre-sales after just 2 days because the numbers were already looking disastrous. That's never a good sign. And what about international markets? There were hopes that Gal Gadot's star power might help in Israel, but early reports suggest Snow White isn't expected to perform well in Tel Aviv either. If that holds true, it means even global markets won't be a safety net. As for total theater count, estimates suggest between 4,000 and 4,500 screens, a similar rollout to The Little Mermaid. But even with that wide release, the film still risks one of the weakest openings for a Disney live-action remake. So the real question remains, is $48 million the bottom, or will Snow White continue its freefall? There's a lot of chatter about Snow White's ticket pre-sales, with some claiming it has reached 22 million. But is that really the case? Right now, it's tough to confirm. Several users have reported checking their local theaters, only to find that ticket purchases aren't even available yet. That's unusual, to say the least. Could this be another case of Disney padding numbers, perhaps by buying up tickets for charitable giveaways? We've seen similar tactics before. Regardless, the reality remains. Hollywood needs to reconnect with mainstream audiences, and